All right. Well, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you all so much for taking the time to join our discussion today. We've got a tremendous slate of panelists that you'll all be hearing from, as well as one of UCLA's own moderating our conversation today. We're going to start off by introducing a number of topics focused on the development of the Femtech space historically, the priorities that the industry has focused on to date, as well as some of the changes and innovations on the horizon looking to the future. So our first panelist today is Tracy MacNeal, a leader in women's health who serves as CEO of Materna Medical, which is a med tech company devoted to improving women's pelvic health through technology and empowerment. Materna was most recently named a finalist for Fast Company's World Changing Ideas Awards in 2021. And the company is also currently enrolling for a pivotal trial through UCLA, for which Dr. Tamara Grisales of UCLA is serving as principal investigator. Tracy also works to highlight the importance of contribution and collaboration within our shared healthcare ecosystem, and she serves as national chair for AdvaMed's Women's Executive Network, which works to amplify the voices of women leaders who are creating the future of healthcare. Next up, we've got Sylvia Kang, who is committed to bringing point-of-care technology to improve consumers' health as co-founder and CEO of Mira. Mira is the first FDA, CE, and CFDA registered comprehensive women's health monitoring platform with 99% accuracy in clinical trials. Mira tracks cycles, predicts ovulation, monitors fetal health, measures ovarian reserve, and detects menopause at home using the hospital-level technology within a palm-sized device. She's also previously taken business and product director roles in a Fortune 500 life sciences company, running a $100 million global business unit there. Next, we are also joined by Stasi Kasianchuk, who serves as director of health coaching at Gennev, where the company is focused on bringing a unique approach to applying lifestyle change to women's hormonal health. The company is the first of its kind online clinic for menopause, providing access to menopause expert OBGYNs and registered dietitian coaches, wellness products, education, and community. And there, Stacey has over a decade of experience as a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and exercise physiologist. Through her experience teaching at OSU and health coaching at Araval, a scientific wellness company, Stacey has mastered the use of biometric data to personalize health and wellness for her clients. And our final panelist for today is Pita Navarro, co-founder and head of clinical research and operations at Evvy. Evvy has worked to improve women's health by building new data sets to close the gender health gap, starting with the vaginal microbiome, and the company is also discovering how new biomarkers can be leveraged to predict risk, diagnose, and treat a variety of critical health conditions in the female body. Pita is a molecular biologist by training with a deep passion for increasing healthcare access and developing meaningful tools to improve health outcomes. She's spent the last 4 years leading clinical operations as a founding team member at Althelis, a biotech company building novel AI-based devices to monitor key biomarkers of inflammation for chronically ill patients. And then last but certainly not least, we have our moderator, Dr. Jennifer McKinney. Dr. McKinney holds a dual appointment at UCLA Anderson School of Management and the UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine's Department of Medicine in the Division of Pulmonology and Critical Care. She is the co-executive director of UCLA Biodesign, a new joint interdisciplinary initiative led by UCLA Health, David Geffen School of Medicine, and the Anderson School of Management that promotes leadership and entrepreneurship in healthcare technology. Dr. McKinney specializes in early stage company formation and technology development in the healthcare sector, and her interests are related to the disruption of the healthcare industry across digital health, medical services, diagnostics, and care delivery transformation. As the founding director of the MedTech Innovator Accelerator, Dr. McKinney has worked extensively with startup companies in the health tech sector, as well as with business development executives from leading manufacturers, including Johnson & Johnson, Amgen, Baxter, BD, Olympus, and others. So again, we've got a great discussion put together for you all today. And with that, I will hand it over to Dr. McKinney to kick things off.
Thank you, Kat, and thanks to the entire Anderson Healthcare Business Association for dedicating a panel to this topic. I'm extremely enthusiastic and excited for the conversation today to be joined by these esteemed colleagues and women who are leading the transformation of healthcare. And I think that we all know the Femtech area has seen a significant rise in investment, reaching over $1 billion in 2021, but still lagging behind the growth and momentum we're seeing in other categories such as fitness and wellness. However, I think the women that we'll hear from today are doing a lot to change that. And so what I'd like to do is start off with sort of a round robin, if you will, today. And perhaps, Tracy, if you might mind kicking it off and thinking about what are some of the key issues that Femtech companies are seeking to address today? What are your top 3 agenda items that you're seeking to change with Materna Medical?
Well, thank you so much for having this panel and for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think there's a couple of, those are kind of 2 different questions. I think there are a lot of really popular parts of Femtech areas that are getting a lot of focus. Certainly pelvic health is one of those, and we are a pelvic health company. I would say the more crowded areas of pelvic health are around pelvic floor laxity. So women get injured during childbirth and then experience sort of lifelong effects around incontinence and prolapse. And those are huge markets. I think incontinence is $12 billion a year in the United States alone. And so they're huge markets, and there's a lot of players trying to fix those symptoms. We're not playing in that space where our first product, Millie, just got FDA clearance in December to treat vaginismus, which is a high tone pelvic floor disorder. So rather than laxity, it's tightness, and the symptoms there are painful intercourse and urinary urgency. So just everything's getting squeezed. Our second pipeline product is the one that's what UCLA is enrolling in our pivotal study, trying to prevent those pelvic floor injuries during childbirth. So we're aiming to be a preventative treatment there instead of treating the symptoms. So now it's a prevention worth a pound of cure. And we're really passionate about those spaces. Just broadly, I would zoom out to say, I think that most Femtech companies are struggling with the fact that we're first movers, right? All of us, whatever we're doing, we're one of the first ones to do it, because there's, and as an investor myself, investors are pattern seekers. They want to look at all the other people who've made money in your space. And so it's just a headwind for all of us. But I think that's part of why we all stick together, because we know we're 51% of the population. It's not a niche.
Thank you, Tracy. And I can appreciate that. So kind of moving towards symptomatic treatment versus actual prevention of the downstream effects that have been plaguing women for decades, if not hundreds of years. Sylvia, would you like to kind of pick that one as well? Kind of what's your credo in launching a company in this medtech, in the Femtech space?
Sure. So again, thank you for having me today. So I would say, I have many observations that in the Femtech industry right now, many companies focus on a chronic problem. So, I personally experienced this when I was pregnant. So, there's a lot of problems, such as you have a PMS, and when you're pregnant and you worry about miscarriage, and then some people have a problem to get pregnant. And then later during menopause, hormone become imbalances, and there's a, hair loss and the pain, the hot flash, all these kind of things. And it's pretty difficult to talk with the doctor about that. The doctor is more like for treatment, right? So you go there and they say, oh, I have this problem. And they say, wow, this is a normal process during your menopause, where you're just unlucky, you're not getting pregnant. So many people don't get the questions answered with some, specific action to do. So I think this is a huge opportunity. And I'm pretty glad to say that, many startups are trying to address this. And obviously, the company we have, Mira, is one of them. So we're trying to measure women's hormone at home, multiple hormones at the same time and continuously with the home device, which is very affordable. And the users or the women can see their hormones immediately on the app. So you can see the trend, you can see what to do, and some analysis by AI or even by some medical consultant can give you suggestions about what to do. So I really think that's that's a key issue, because it's like, just like a weight loss, and also like the acne on your face, right? Where do you go to seek for that solution? So I think that's a very important thing. And another important thing I saw recently in the Femtech space is about mental health. I think this space is very lacking. And now in this society, we face so much stress, especially after COVID. Our kids stay at home and they have to work at the same time. Many things have changed. So many people suffer from, we don't know how to deal with that. We don't know how to deal with that. We struggle. So how do we build something that's very easy for women, on addressing specific questions? Because mental health is also a pretty big area, and very easy to access. Because if you have ever tried to seek for some therapist through your insurance today, it actually takes a pretty long process. So I think that's a really booming area as well.
Thanks, Sylvia. And I can appreciate, having reviewed your website extensively, how inclusive and how you almost make that the solution, it's not just about fertility monitoring, it's about women's health monitoring, and whether you're trying to conceive naturally or through IVF, there's a way that technology can help a couple or an individual through their journey. And when you spoke about mental health, I think that's a great transition to Stacey, because I think that you're exactly trying to tackle some of those things in the menopause space. Stacey?
Thank you. Yes, it's great to see the overlap in all of these different niche areas that we're all working on. To Tracy's point, it really is about coming together to holistically support women throughout their lives. At Gennev, we are focused on that. We are second half of life and having women thrive throughout their menopause journey, which obviously starts in perimenopause, and we support through postmenopause. We find that most women when they come to us, they are at their wits' end, and they have had, unfortunately, poor experiences being supported with their symptoms and their journey. So we're looking at trying to provide both the medical side with our telemedicine providers, all OBGYNs who have been specifically trained in menopause. Even our chief medical officer said that she didn't get training in menopause until she sought it out. It wasn't part of her clinical training. Most of that is focused on the beginning stages with pregnancy. And so a lot of doctors don't have that training. And so many of our clients, their OBGYNs, when they reach this phase of life, just don't have that support. And the other piece we're trying to bring is that focus and attention to menopause being a natural and normal part of every woman's life. And any individual born with ovaries will experience menopause in some way, shape, or form. Some women do have more extreme experiences or need more support. And that's where we're also offering the lifestyle side of things. Many women don't know that there are things that they can change in their lifestyle to get the support that they need to feel better. And then to Dr. McKinney's point on the mental health side of things, we also provide a space that women are validated and heard. And that in itself makes a huge difference. And it sounds like everyone on this panel is doing that in some way, shape, or form. But really allowing for that, we have found, has been tremendous support for women to really be able to then open up a lot of possibilities in terms of what their treatment looks like.
Thank you, Stacey. And last but not least, Pita, I feel like you've got this. And just to be clear, I love when I hear Tracy talk, because she's like, the word vagina is going to be used today. And you guys are tackling the vaginal microbiome. So tell us more about that. How does it relate to your overall mission in the Femtech space?
Yeah, definitely. So the broader goal of Evvy is we started on the very simple insight of we don't know how to best take care of the female body. Just given that we weren't required to be included in clinical research till 1993 because of these complexities like hormones. And I think that we really want to take these previously viewed as complexities into signals to better diagnose, better predict. And so in reality, we want to take all these complex women's health conditions with these umbrella diagnoses, and then use high fidelity testing to better characterize and better inform treatment pathways. And I think we're starting with the vaginal microbiome just because, there's all this research on its link to cervical cancer progression, STI acquisition, preterm birth, yet no one really has information or they can't access this information on their bodies. And so really, a lot of our work has been to educate women and also validate them, because existing, diagnostics don't really catch what they're experiencing, whether that's, painful sex or pelvic pain, but really giving women information to like what's going on down there. And I think for us, it's been also just saying the word vagina out loud and pitching, vaginal problems to people who don't have vaginas, I would say has been very interesting. But really, I think the vagina does miraculous work, every single day. And I think that really getting a better understanding and removing the stigma around the vagina is extremely important.
Yeah, and Pita, I like that you're echoing what Stacey said about reducing the stigma, and I think that there is that to be addressed, not just in Femtech and Equitech and other areas that are kind of gaining momentum and have been under addressed by either investors or corporates or healthcare providers as a whole in terms of being able to have treatments to recommend to their patients. I'd like to kind of switch gears and just looking at while we're talking about it, because you kind of alluded to it, Pita, and think about how are you pitching? How are you gaining? And I'm going to go off script here for a minute. You're thinking about pitching to an audience. And Tracy, you speak to this so well, but how do you approach going into a room of investors, positioning your product, positioning Femtech as one that can generate ROI for investors, but also one that is mission driven and can kind of carry the sea change with it?
You want me to start? Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a big question. I'll just say, I think that there's a way to talk about women's health in a way that comes from a place of anger and defensiveness, because it is legitimately 50 years behind where it probably should be. I think, to Pita's point, there's a long history of decisions that were made around clinical research and inclusion that limit our understanding of women's bodies. And even thinking about what women's health is sometimes sounds like gynecology, and it's really so much more than that, right? I think that for what I have found is that there's a framework behind everything that we talk about, that is that when women are happier and healthier, everyone's happier and healthier, right? Children are happier and healthier. All kinds of social indicators get better when women are cared for. And I think, that we have all of these, little sayings like happy wife, happy life. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Like, we know this in our social fabric. And I think speaking to investors of any gender from the standpoint of that, what we have found, 90% of our cap table is male, wonderful men who love their wives and daughters and girlfriends and know that the world is a better place when women are happy. And I think, I guess rounding the bend on that is that when women heal, men heal too. Some of these inequities in our society are not great for men either. And so just sort of having that as an inclusive message, I found has been pretty important.
Thank you, Tracy. Sylvia, I'm gonna pass that to you because I know you've been on the other side of many a pitch. And how do you approach that? And what strategies can you communicate to our audience?
Sure. Yeah, so it's definitely a pretty difficult job, just to be honest. I think it's not about, I don't really think there's the men, they don't like this or they intentionally have some purpose behind this. It's just difficult for people to understand. When you're pitching this, they don't experience this, especially if they're not married. We have a female hormone company, right? If they don't have a girlfriend or they're not married, it's pretty difficult to understand what is the problem. Even you tell them, and it's just hard for them to picture. So I think the ways that one is we need some help here. I think we need to work together on this because there's an awareness issue. We all know that if in the workspace, if the woman is getting better and the man is also getting better by themselves as well. But there's a lot of things need to be worked on, and there's awareness need to be raised. And it's it has to come with time, and also comes with the all these startup companies we're doing, like this kind of panel we're doing. We just have to keep talking about this, so that's gonna create a better background information for a lot of men about what's going on with Femtech. And another thing is I think we have to when we pitch about this, sometimes we link a little bit more towards what they care about. So, for example, the female hormone issue. Also, sometimes men have a hormone issue. When you talk about the fertility, 50% of the problem is actually coming from the men as well. So it's something the market doesn't really only serve women. So although the problem, the product we create, we want to solve women's problem. But if the problem is resolved, the men care about that as well, right? If you have trouble to get to be conceived, rape, then you go through IVF, it's pretty painful. It's a whole family is investing time, energy, resource on this. So we're really trying to pitch, more, we are Femtech, but we try to pitch the effect, the outcome is serving more than just the woman, because women and the men, they're connected. They're all in this world. They're trying to do one thing together. So that's another angle we're trying to go.
Yeah, Sylvia, I really appreciate that approach and that viewpoint. I think, we saw our first Femtech unicorn this past year in August 2021 with Maven, of course, kind of looking at that end-to-end integrated practice unit, Michael Porter's vision for healthcare, enacted in an online model. And, hopefully there's more to come. I think one thing you're getting at, and I think Stacey and Pita can, specifically speak to is, the evidence that needs to be generated to perhaps validate, the investment. So maybe, Stacey, I'll pass it to you, and then the same question to Pita. Sort of what evidence are you using and generating to help build confidence in the space?
Great point. And I think in the evidence, we need, as everyone's said, we need more research, but we need the support and the advocates to get that research. I think all of us here could come up with a beautifully designed study that would, answer a lot of our questions. And it's how do we get the support and the advocates to get that out there. And some of the areas that we are seeing, with our model, we have proven a 94% efficacy in terms of menopause treatment, where women are feeling better with the approach that we're using. So we often, we are pitching that when we are going to our panel of investors. The other thing that's been helpful too, I think, coming back to that relationship, we need to have diversity in this space. And so it's important to include all others other than just women or individuals that are identifying as women in this space. And part of that also can be that relatability. Sylvia touched on this, and even Tracy, just in terms of how impacting women's health does impact the health of others. Some other angles that we've seen, we are also looking at supporting women in the workplace. And when work is impacted, and when we're looking at women who are going through their menopause journey, if they've been in that work environment, often they are leaders in that space because of their experience. So the loss in a workplace if someone is going through menopause and is not able to perform at the level that they used to be able to, or they leave the workforce, that often comes at a cost. And with males in that space that are losing some of these really important or key workers in their area, employees, that can be another way to say, hey, here's how we can support them. And that's also going to help you in your business to maintain the work that they've been doing. The other piece, I will note that this is more anecdotal, and unfortunately, I wish it was more men reaching out to Gennev to help their female partners. But we have had several men come truly concerned about their spouses or partners and with what they're experiencing, and asking how they can specifically help. And so those reach out and provide a glimmer of hope. It's like, yes, it is out there. There is that desire to support someone that you care about, and making sure that they're getting the treatment that they need with whatever modality it is. So it does exist, and how can we make that collectively really show that that is a niche area that needs more investment in.
Thanks, Stacey. Pita, while you're talking to it, I'm seeing this thread of, there's that anecdote like happy wife, happy life, women's health, it affects, everyone's health. I think that even more importantly, in kind of piece that you're looking at in the vaginal microbiome, as you're looking at this evidence, we know that there's the impact of maternal health has significant downstream impact on prenatal and post-birth health, and kind of long-term childhood or impacts. And I'm assuming that'll be an output of your research at some point. But I don't want to sway your answer, so I'm going to let you take it over.
No, I think for us, even going back to the raising money question, we were pitching, and investors would tell us, well, are you a period company? Are you a pregnancy company? Or are you a menopause company? And a lot of our work was just explaining women go through so much more than just those three things. And I think that just having to explain like what a vagina does a lot of times, but just to Sylvia's point on like creating awareness on every other company and how it's going to take a village. But I think for us, evidence base is extremely important. And we have 2 ongoing IRB studies because I think while it's incredibly important to improve access to these products and services through digital health, the unfortunate reality, at least for us, is that there's no existing care pathway that is shown to be appropriately effective. Like specifically for bacterial vaginosis, recurrence rates are 80% within 3 months of treatment. And so I think that for us, it's extremely important to gather the evidence of, there is a lot more research we need to be doing into characterizing the primary conditions. Initially, we were really interested in the vaginal microbiome because of its link to these secondary conditions like preterm birth and cervical cancer progression. But just from our first couple of thousand customers, it was really, we don't really understand BV. It's like the IBS of the vagina, or, what are the different types of yeast infections, or what are the different types of vaginitis that can then have all of these effects. And so for us, it's extremely important. And just for example, 11 to 40% of preterm births are caused by BV, yet treating the BV doesn't decrease the outcome of preterm birth. And so that just goes to say, we just don't understand these primary conditions, even though we understand that they have a link. So for us, just building that evidence base is extremely important.
Thanks, Pita. And we have some fantastic questions. So I think if Kat doesn't step in, I'm going to kind of hop around while we're on topic, because we have these fantastic questions from the audience. And Daniela is asking, what are some of the ways you're creating spaces where women can feel more open to talking about vaginal health? And I think we talked a little bit about that, but I think that's an area worthy of further conversation. So maybe I'm going to flip it around a little bit. And Sylvia, let's start with you.
Sure. So, we're a directly to consumer company, and we try to do this as much as possible. So we found that there's some very practical ways. For example, on the Facebook community or on social media community. So Mira has the pretty big community. I think we have more than 8,000 or 9,000 people over there already. So we talk about female hormone, we talk about sex, we talk about how to get pregnant, sometimes even how to prevent pregnancy, or you're close to menopause or not, anything about, hormone and the related symptoms. So it's a pretty safe environment. People share their hormone numbers and share their symptoms and say, what other people, what they feel about that. And also we try to generate as much free content to our users as possible. So if they subscribe our newsletter, which, they can easily do on our website, and we sent out this newsletter about hormone health, like sex health, like vagina, how that change, even sex position, how to get pregnant faster, or how to avoid pregnancy, all this kind of thing to them. We feel like it's there's no shame. So first, we always tell our users, you shouldn't feel shame about your body. You have a vagina, which is fantastic. You have a uterine, which is fantastic as well. So there's no shame to talk about this. It's just a very normal part of your body and what you're going through. And the second thing is like we try to give them education, because everything is actually science. So going back to what Pita and Stasi say, we need more evidence-based research. We need to put things more in a scientific mindset. So we see them as this is part of your body, this is what you're going through. So, we provide you all these scientific tools, article, and, all this knowledge, and you can talk about that scientifically. You can talk about that very, very well, very objectively with your doctor, with your partner about your symptom and what kind of help you need. No shame. So that's how we're trying to do to create some group or some safer environment for women to openly talk about their body.
Yeah, and I think I heard Pita, speak a little bit to that as well in terms of the scientific evidence as well as just the community. Pita, what efforts are you making at Evvy in terms of doing that outreach, communicating with women such that there is a space to talk about bacterial vaginosis or whatever it is that might be the treatment you're seeking to address?
Definitely. So we initially launched our Instagram, and we are a vaginal health company, so all we talk about is vaginas. And I think we've made it very personable. We saw our TikTok blow up when we started making videos of bacterial vaginosis, and bacterial vaginosis influencers reached out to us. Women are really willing to talk about this openly, because I think that they have felt there's a distrust from women who have been experiencing these issues chronically and the healthcare system. And so women go to social media, they go to Reddit, they go to Facebook communities that are extremely active to talk about their issues. And I think that they are so desperate to find answers that they're very willing to share what they're going through. And so we also host, we have AMAs with our science advisory board. And one of the doctors on our science advisory board, she's amazing. She used to teach medical students, and she transitioned to now teaching her patients, because she says, your patients are smart. They are willing to really learn about their conditions. And we have to treat them like, they're smart. And so let's give them the information. Let's help them break it down. And let's talk about the uncomfortable things, because, for some reason, the diagnosis conditions for vaginal health are, does your vagina smell like, rotten eggs, like fish, those are the things we need to discuss, but also change in the future, because I think that's also what makes women so uncomfortable.
Thanks, Pita. And I think, Stacey, if you wouldn't mind building on that, because I got the breadcrumbs earlier of the community that you're building for the menopausal space. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think similar, it's about our modeling of that normalization of the symptoms that women are experiencing, the menopause experience, and the changes that they're going through. So a lot of the topics that even Sylvia and Pita mentioned, we talk about one-on-one with our clients, in whether it's their working with their health coaches, their dietitians, and then also our doctors. Similarly, we also provide education, and including different YouTube videos and podcasts where our chief medical officer addresses these issues very openly. And then we also do have a growing Facebook community, as well as we've also done an emotional wellness group where women have come together and they're able to be validated by other women. I think that's the most powerful piece, when they can come together, in this case on a Zoom screen, and hear from other women's experience and just know that they're not alone. So that's been really powerful. I think even more so than reading about it or hearing from it from a practitioner, just really knowing that someone else is experiencing the same thing that they have, that has been really helpful as well. And I think that all comes back to really just talking about it without that shame or guilt, and knowing that it's normal.
Thanks, Stacey. Stacey and Tracy, that's a good transition there. Tracy, I'm gonna switch this question a little bit, just given your background as an executive in the medical device industry prior to becoming CEO of Materna. I think looking at the obstetrics and gynecology field if we're going to kind of anchor Femtech to, not necessarily that Femtech is not necessarily gynecology, but there is that perception, and there have been a host of, let's call them missteps, but I would say, significantly damaging recalls in the medical device space. As we're looking back at vaginal meshes, we're looking at, I don't want to mention name manufacturers by name, several birth control devices, as well as others that have actually had significant long-term, adverse outcomes, in fact, death in some cases. And so when we're creating sort of a safe space, and granted, I'll acknowledge there's also was an investor hesitation for many years because of those recalls, and no one really wanted to invest in the market. How do you think about those sort of missteps in the market, if you will, with respect to today's space in making investments in creating a safe place to be confident in the space?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think it's important to be up to speed about all of it. If you're running a Femtech company, I call them zombies and dead bodies, right? Companies that didn't die, but didn't go anywhere. And then all the companies that failed, because investors know about them. And if you don't, you lose some credibility there. I think so my previous exits were in more polite conversation, like orthopedics. And so it took me a little while to understand some of the issues in women's health myself. And, one of my main questions, for example, coming from orthopedics for pelvic floor issues is, well, why can't we just fix it? Why can't you just stitch it back up? Like if you sever your Achilles tendon, you just stitch it back up. Yeah, you're in a boot for a while, but, it heals. And what I learned is your pelvic floor holds up the weight of your entire trunk. So it's not really possible to immobilize it after surgery. And I think that's what a lot of the issues, I can't comment on all of the issues around pelvic mesh. I think it was the largest mass tort case history in history, right? Huge issues. So, I think it's important to look at that. But it's interesting for us, right? I think the early years of our company, investors did say, oh, you're dealing in that pelvic floor space, there's all kinds of litigation there. But if you look at it in the cold light of day, logically, our technology would reduce those litigations, right? If we're successful, right? We're in a pivotal trial. But if we're able to make it easier and safer to deliver vaginally, all of those issues would be less likely to be litigated. So we're actually not just in the cost reduction and outcomes improvement space, we're in the risk reduction space, right? And so I think investors are starting to see it that way. I think hospitals definitely see it that way. You know, when we started recruiting for our pivotal trial, we were shocked. I mean, big organizations came on in 2 months. It takes a year usually. And what our clinicians are saying is, you know, we know pelvic floor injury is a huge problem for our patients. We have nothing for them, right? And childbirth is the number one reason for hospitalization worldwide. You'd think that investors could do the math, but so you just have to understand the headwinds, because it's not logical, but just trying to just stick with the facts and being consistent.
Thanks, Tracy, and really, really fortunate and proud that UCLA Health is a part of that. And I know Tamara Grisales personally, and she's just a fantastic champion for women's health. I want to shift gears a little in the second half of the conversation, thinking about sort of, you know, how do you operationalize, how do you commercialize, how do you bring these products to market? And there's a fantastic question from the audience that kind of echoes a little bit of our pre-discussion for today's panel in terms of scaling products, getting them to reach market, and making sure that they're kind of equitable and accessible to everyone. So maybe Stacey, let's kind of thinking about, you know, your mature segment. How are you looking at it, scaling your product and looking at equitable access for Gennev?
Yes, it's a big question, right? How do we do this at scale? So certainly part of that is getting funding. That obviously we need to have more support and advocates for that. We also need to have more insurance coverage for women's health. Even in the healthcare space, the amount, what's covered for women's health is still not enough, and we need to get more of that into this Femtech space. And without the hoops to jump over, that's something that Gennev is looking for in the future. To how do we use insurance, be able to accept insurance, including Medicare and Medicaid. But as probably everyone knows here, that's not just flipping a switch. And it's not just, you know, signing up and all of a sudden you can accept insurance. So we have to make that more accessible, because that is also what our community knows how to do. They know how to go to a doctor, they know how to pay their copay, they know how to use their insurance. And so we do see that as a barrier right now to being able to make that more accessible. And that's something we're working towards. And we also need to have, again, coming back to the advocates in this space, that we need to be able to get all of that support to be able to move things forward. And that's where showing the work that we have done, showing the progress that we have made, the impact that we have made with the clients and our patients, and then how it does impact a bottom line, coming back to the workspace, as well as to some of the other points Tracy was just talking about as well. If this is a preventative model, this is how we can decrease healthcare costs down the road. And so showing that the math on that is really an important way to getting that investment, getting that funding to be able to support the scaling and incorporating more technology. That's another thing that we want to do, is be able to have more technology access outside of our telehealth platform.
Yeah, Stacey, I think this is a fantastic point, that the lack of CMS coverage and a benefits category for digital solutions right now is holding back not just solutions in Femtech, but the digital space overall. And certainly, I think much reform is needed. We've seen the FDA, begin to dip the toe in the water with the breakthrough device program. However, we need a lot more to be done downstream to cover really innovative technologies, in particular those digital ones. Pita, same question to you, looking at scaling products, reaching markets, equitable access.
Yeah, definitely. I think in terms of scaling our product, I think genomics is at its frontier, I would say, or not. I think it's where direct-to-consumer genetic testing was 10 years ago. And so I think although we are direct-to-consumer and it's an at-home test, so that makes it accessible, I think our biggest challenge is in affordability, just because of the type of testing that we're doing and because we're using metagenomics. I think the price of microbiome sequencing will significantly decrease in the next 5 years. But I think in terms of, if there's underserved communities that can't access our product right now, how can we make sure that the research we are doing on the information we're getting will also help these underserved communities in the future by translating that into the care that these specific communities receive. And so I think, once the price of sequencing goes down, hopefully it'll be a lot more affordable. But in terms of accessibility, I think, our test is available. You don't need a doctor as of now. So I think it's pretty accessible. I think affordability is where we have a challenge.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Tracy, I know you guys have a little bit of a bifurcated model, right? So you've got a consumer product, an FDA regulated product and clinical trial. How do you think about scaling each of those products individually or as a portfolio with respect to commercialization?
Carefully. So I just also want to thank all of my co-panelists for the network effect, because it's really, I think all of us are working on expanding awareness in the female consumer. It's kind of hard to believe, but women often don't advocate for themselves the way we sort of think they would. So as a business person, you're like, well, if they've got this problem, I've got this solution. Of course, they're gonna, advocate for themselves. But what we see is women don't always. And so I think it's really important also to be speaking to the clinician. And I don't think in women's health you can do one or the other. I think almost if you look at women's health, just generally speaking, you almost always see this omni-channel approach where you're working with clinicians and we're all being conveners in our space, right? Trying to help. And I think telehealth, like what Stacey is doing with Gennev, it's very reasonable to think that I can help my patients find my products and services better if I find my clinicians and bring everybody together. And I think you don't see this as much in other parts of healthcare. But I think it's a really key part of a success. And so we're using those two channels for both of our products. So we're setting up our channels. We've got an e-commerce channel for our dyspareunia product. And then when our birth product comes out, it'll drop into those same channels. So working with healthcare providers and selling to pregnant moms and speaking to them about the indications and claims that we'll hopefully have at that time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tracy. Sylvia, switching gears back to the digital side, tell us about your commercialization, scaling, and ensuring access for everyone.
Sure. So I think for because we're directly to consumers, so I think the first thing you need to evaluate is like if you have a product market fit. I think that's so important, and it's actually difficult to evaluate, really know the answer before you launch the product, right? So don't solely just rely on market survey because people what they say and what they do can be different, and you can test, you can do a trial, maybe like pre-sell some products, see if how much they're gonna convert, and you can use Facebook and ads, all this other channel. Just really try to do that, and then list out your best value proposition, list out different messages to the consumer, say what resonates the best. I think that's a foundation for everything. Otherwise, later scaling is very difficult. And the second thing is like as a consumer product, you just have to be everywhere they are at, and they're on social media, and maybe they're on your website, they're on some influencers channels, they're on Google. So you pretty much need to do everything. So from our experience, we have been scaling up like crazy in the past 2 years. So we found that it's almost impossible to have a magic bullet. So you have to have everything kind of working together. And I don't know how to call this, but it's like you reach your critical mass. And then you're gonna go, this is just gonna pick up. And before that, it's just so difficult. And sometimes you struggle. You say, oh my gosh, how come I invested so much on this channel? It just doesn't pick up. It's like everything have to work together. But at the same time, my last piece of advice is that you need to have your priority or focus, because every startup company has a very limited resource. Doesn't matter how much money you raised. It doesn't matter what product you're doing. You always have too many things to do than the resource you could do. So you have to prioritize. You have to kind of think about, what channel or what strategy are the lowest hanging fruit, right? So that can give me some immediate return and that can be easier to do. However, that also can pave some road for the future. So you have to think in that way, and then focus on the ones that you think that will pick up and that will be helpful for you, and it's doable. You have to start from feasible and doable stuff, and then go from there. And always be very open-minded, be take a lot of trial and error. That's exactly how Mira grew. We had no idea how B2C, how a product like this will grow on the market, but we tried so many different things, and when you document your test results, you reasoning through that, and you try again. So we see that's a way to go for, directly to consumer product. It takes a lot of time, a lot of efforts. Sometimes a lot of time is like testing you. It's like seriously like testing your face. Like, do you still believe this thing gonna pick up? Do you still believe you're gonna be able to run until the next round is closed? However, I strongly believe that's the only way you will have to go through that in order to scale some products.
Yeah, and certainly, Sylvia, having the three-peat of regulatory clearances, I can imagine you have a lot of channels to manage because you got CFDA, FDA, and
Yes.
CE mark. And so
Yes.
when you're looking at planning as a follow-up, when you're planning your product launch into multiple international markets, what are you prioritizing? How are you thinking about where the biggest opportunities in this space are?
Sure. So we do everything from testing data and the results from our market. Obviously, we have our assumption, right? But we pretty much do our marketing as like a scientific experiment. So we first have a hypothesis. We think, okay, for something like a hormone testing, it's probably going to work better with the countries like the US or Europe, because people are better educated and they comprehend this women's health concept. They know they have this need. You don't have to educate them to tell them, say, oh, you have this need, you don't know. So it's probably easier to start in that way. But also you want to somewhere with a population a little bit bigger, digital channel is easier to reach. So obviously we think probably US would be the best. And then we register a product with FDA, and we have a lot of clinical trials ongoing as well. And then we also, at the same time, when you're building a little bit, and then you will say, okay, now I have resource, and can I do something else? How do we expand? I not only have to worry about next month, but I have to worry about like maybe 2 years later, because new product development takes time. Regulation takes time to approve, right? A lot of things need to be done. So what's the next, where should I invest next? And we kind of balance the budget. You obviously have to take your recent needs, maybe like, 70% versus 30% or something, but the other 30% has to be put on the, what you're going to grow in the future. A little bit like what Google wrote, 10% of their time or 15% of their time is on some future uncertain projects. So that's how we are, operating. It's more like on a rolling basis. Obviously, we also take a look at the, what the competitors doing, what the market is doing overall. But just from the few years of experience, we think those things are good as a starting point. It's a little bit high level. If our audience, who ask this question is thinking about to run a startup or to build a startup, you probably really want to, do very practical thing, like test the market and find out what works best for you, because every product is different, every segment is different. Even your channel can result in a very different actions you need to do.
Thank you, Sylvia. And I want to pause and just thank our audience for the fantastic questions. We've been trying to run through them live as we go. So if there are more questions, please put them into the chat. I want to move on. And Sylvia, I think you kind of touched on one of the other questions we had from the audience today, but maybe Stacey, let's kick us on off with you in terms of what advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs in the Femtech space? And maybe when you're thinking about the answer to that question, if there are any sort of hurdles that you've faced in bringing your product to market to date.
Sorry, my unmute button has been temperamental. I think, again, coming together, reaching out to entrepreneurs, CEOs that have done this work. There's no reason that anybody needs to go at this alone. Learn from our mistakes, learn from our wins, and then be able to use those, because it is important that we are collaborating and supporting each other in this space. So that would be my number one thing, is really don't go out at your own, and don't reinvent the wheel. Oftentimes, you're going to find that there's been things that we've already done or we've learned from. You can take those learnings and be able to apply that to your product that you're bringing to that space there. I think the other piece is also being willing to be vulnerable and willing to make the mistakes. I think that we've all experienced that as well. Sylvia had mentioned we do a lot of our learning through marketing science experiments too. I call them science experiments, but we're really just testing where do women respond. And the insights, we really have learned a lot from women just in terms of how they're responding to marketing. And then we also have done, our CEO spent a significant amount of time this summer actually meeting individually with different sectors of our market. So our product, individuals who consistently buy products, individuals that are consistently taking appointments, and then individuals who have also consistently been working with a dietitian. And so learning from your client base and really being open to that feedback that they're providing has also been really informative. And so if you can do that early on, that can certainly continue to help build your product and inform you so you don't go too far in the wrong direction using that information to curate what you're doing in a successful direction for yourself and for your client base.
Thanks, Stacey. Tracy, why don't you pick that one up next?
I agree with everything Stacey just said. And I guess I would say another dimension is to start with the end in mind. I think it's important to have a sense of what your exit is. Well, listen, if you're running a lifestyle company and you're using your own money and you're just trying to build a profitable business, do whatever you want. But if you're raising money and you need to get a return back to your investors, it's important to understand who will acquire you at what point, under what circumstances, and how much money and time it's going to take to do that. I talk to a lot of other entrepreneurs, folks that are trying to get going in this space. And I just think that's a piece that's often missing is they are thinking to get to the next milestone. Okay, I need to raise $1 million to do this thing. And I think it's not as clear to them. And I think you can only get so far, maybe with angel investors with that, but when you get to institutional investors, they need to understand when and how they're going to make their money back. And so understanding the circumstances under which you'd be valuable to a larger company is really, really key.
Excellent, Tracy. Let's do Pita, and then I see a question in the audience. I think is a fantastic wrap up. So, Pita, same question to you around advice for aspiring Femtep entrepreneurs and any hurdles they might expect to encounter.
Yeah, I think three things just really quickly is one, keep your mission big, but remember to start with a really focused problem and a really focused customer. I think specifically in women's health, there's so much white space and so much to do that I think, your 10-year goal can be, reinvent something, but I think you really have to start with a very focused problem and be obsessed with the customer of that problem. And another thing is, venture capital isn't the only type of capital. I think a lot of the times we think that's the only way. And especially with women's health, that could get a little harder. To Stacey's point is although we built and launched our entire company and our product in 6 months with three of us, we really stand on the shoulders of giants. So really built for us, it was a science advisory board, but really have mentors and advisors. And then another thing is that I would look at your company in phases with that very focused mission. And I think that that is really helpful for us in terms of okay, we want to build a new understanding of the female body, but it's actually going to take several phases to get there. And how can we focus on that? But yeah, I think those are the main things that have really helped us.
Pita, I like that you put that in terms of looking at things in terms of the entire female body. And it goes back to what you said earlier about kind of dispelling that myth that you're either a pregnancy company, a fertility company, or a menopause company. It's really about sort of the entire life cycle, if you will, of women's health and integrating across that. And I don't think we're going to get that done in a day.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And reach out to people. I always get messages on my LinkedIn. I'm always happy to help entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Pita. So last question coming from Alice in the audience. I think this is just an inspiring and really great question to end on. The question is what kind of success stories can you share about individual women who, or testimonials whose health was greatly improved or impacted by the work you all are doing? Stacey, maybe let's kick that one off with you.
Absolutely. The first thing that comes to mind is a client who had a significant challenging health history, and she was put into surgical menopause when she had a hysterectomy, and that hysterectomy surgery unfortunately led to a pulmonary embolism, which left her disabled to the extent that she had an impact on both her functionality and her brain health. And so for her, when she came to working with me at the beginning of 2020, there was a lot of things going on, and she built her team of healthcare providers, which I was a part of. And I loved her perspective that she considered herself the CEO of her own health. So she came with that idea that I am taking this initiative. But one thing that was always a big part of her healing was walking. And that started with her walking to the end of her driveway when she was first recovering from her pulmonary embolism. And she made a point to walk every day. That was part of her recovery process. And this past fall, she came to me and said, you know, she lived in San Diego, but had previously lived in New York. And she really had a connection to New York, and the New York Marathon was offering the virtual option. And so she came to me this fall and said, do you think I can walk the New York Marathon virtually on her own in San Diego? And I said, I think you can do that. She's been walking and consistently she had built up to about 4 miles per day. And so it took some significant training, but she had 12 hours to complete the 26.2 miles. And she did it on the day of, in San Diego. She planned out a route. She had people cheering her along the way. We built the plan that she would incorporate rest and recovery with the time that she had. She was able to go back to her condo, take a nap, get food, but she walked the 26.2 miles in the time given. And so I think there's this, again, coming back to taking away the boundaries, and so much of women's health is confined to going back to Pita's point, you get your period, then you're pregnant, then you go through a menopause, where we have to help women knock down these boundaries. And so that's my success story, that she accomplished this because she wasn't willing to let boundaries or physicians that have told her in the past that, yo, you can't do this. We found a way that she could, and she could do it safely. And I think that possibility is out there for all sorts of women that need that access to do that.
Thanks, Stacey. I'm going to pass the baton over to Pita so we can hear from everyone.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of success stories in terms of, like, doctors usually only test for the binary presence of like two bacteria to determine an infection, yes or no. And there's so many other things that could be causing bacteria. So we get a lot of testimonials on, you know, I'm not crazy. I do have something that's wrong with me. The doctors just don't test for it. And 58% of our customers are subscribers, so they test over time. And we're starting to see a lot of going from dysbiosis into a more balanced vaginal microbiome over the last 6 months, which has been really, really good.
Fantastic. Sylvia?
Yeah, so we have many success stories. So one customer, she had a hormone issue and was on birth control for many years. And when they tried to conceive, which is no luck for 1 year with many doctors, and was deciding to go to IVF, which was very expensive and painful. But the night before that, and her husband found the Mira on the website. They initially thought it's a little bit expensive, but they decided to give it a try. And then the day they go to IVF, they found they're already pregnant. So it saved them a lot of energy and the time going through this painful process. But the thing I really want to say is that, I've been running this company for multiple years. At the beginning, I thought, this raising the fund and growing the business, scaling, all this operational team, all these things are just so important. It consumes all my energy. But right now, I really think helping people is the most important thing, because that brings me happiness, truly bring me happiness. With Mira, I feel connected with so many users I never knew. And I feel like my impact was helpful to them, was giving them really something. There's a compassion feeling in there, deep compassion, synthetic compassion feeling in there. So I think that's very good. And I think many audience here may be thinking about to have their own startup. I at this point, I really want to share with you that I think this is something you're really going to get. This is true value you're really going to get as an entrepreneur.
Thanks, Sylvia. And last but not least, Tracy.
All right, I'll keep it brief, but I do have two. So my first is for Millie. It's the product that's on the market to treat vaginismus. We had a patient who had been suffering. So all of a sudden, in her early 20s, she started having urinary urgency. She had to pee every hour, 24 hours a day. For 9 years, it was debilitating. And she saw so many doctors who told her that there was nothing wrong with her. It was all in her head. And she finally found pelvic floor physical therapy. And within 2 months, she was cured. She was angry, but she was cured. And so that's really the space for Millie. And I just think it's just a point about advocacy. Don't give up. Find the right thing for you. It's out there. And chronic pelvic floor tightness is a lot more common than people realize. Second one is a really quick one. It's a single data point off our pivotal study. It's a single N of 1, but it's a story that we all love to tell, that there was an 8-pound baby that came through the first birth at one of our new hospitals. 8-pound baby, not a single laceration on mom. So it's something really exciting to look forward to if we can prove it on a big scale.
Well, I want to say thank you, Tracy, and thank you to all the panelists. I hearing these stories and thinking about the potential to scale and to impact, not one but many women and their partners, loved ones, and children through the work you all are doing is just astounding and tremendous. So thank you to the HBA for again devoting the time for this topic and bringing these fantastic female leaders to HBA today. So thank you all.